You came for cake? We came for your signature. That's what my father said. On my birthday. There were no candles, no wine, no laughter. Just a dining table full of relatives, a stack of legal papers, and a smile too rehearsed to mean anything. They called it love. But when I refused to hand over $750,000, suddenly I was unstable. They didn't argue. They filed for guardianship. That's when I realized they weren't trying to help me. They were trying to erase me. But I didn't come unarmed. If you've ever been the strong one in the family, until they turned on you, drop a 1 in the comments. If you haven't, drop a 0 because this isn't just my story. It could be yours too. You came for cake? We came for your signature. I parked like I always did, 2 feet from the curb, far enough from the mailbox, because Dad always made a comment if it was blocked. The bottle of wine in my passenger seat had rolled slightly from the turn into the driveway, still wrapped in brown paper. Beside it, a loaf of sourdough I'd baked the night before, crust split and golden. A peace offering maybe, or maybe just a habit. The dogwood in the front yard had started to bud again, white petals like fragile flags of truce. But nothing about this felt like a celebration. I stepped onto the porch, the familiar creak under my weight bringing back muscle memories I didn't ask for. The welcome mat still read, "Bless this mess," even though no one inside ever acknowledged there was one. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, lips tight. "You're here," she said. Not happy birthday, not even hello. Just a statement of fact, like I was an overdue package. I held out the bread and wine. She took them without meeting my eyes and vanished into the kitchen. The silence that followed wasn't calm. It was pressure, like something waiting to collapse. I stepped inside and paused at the dining room doorway. Every chair was filled. Dad at the head of the table in the navy suit he hadn't worn since Aunt Linda's funeral. Sierra in gold. Literally. Her blouse shimmered like it had been spun from metal. Her necklace bore the same logo as her boutique brand. Even her nails looked like they had their own publicist. "Happy birthday, big sis," Sierra said with a smile so wide it hurt to look at. I glanced around the table. Uncles, aunts, even Cousin Mark, who hadn't shown his face since the will dispute 5 years ago. No one smiled. No one moved. They were waiting. A single chair at the far end, mine, farthest from Dad. A glass of water, no wine, no cake, no candles, just water and expectation. Dad cleared his throat. "Since you're here," he began, folding his hands, as if we were in a boardroom, "we want to discuss the inheritance, specifically the $750,000 account. Not your inheritance, not even Grandpa's legacy. Just the $750, like it was a Black Friday deal they were cashing in on. Your sister's in a bind," he continued smoothly. "Some bad luck, business setbacks. We know, you'd want to help." Sierra dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed napkin. "It's been hard," she whispered. "I never wanted to ask you, but the brand is my life, and it's falling apart." My fingers tightened slightly under the table. Not from shock, from restraint. "You understand, of course," Dad said. "Family helps family." I let my gaze blur, remembering another birthday, my 10th. Sierra got a pony with pink ribbons. I handed out cupcakes and brushed its tail. That was the year I learned. Loyalty didn't make you special, it made you convenient. I looked back to the present. The room smelled like roasted chicken, but no one was eating, just sitting, waiting for me to fold. A manila envelope slid across the table. Dad's hand stayed on it a second longer than necessary. "Just need your signature," he said. "We'll handle the rest." I didn't reach for it. I didn't speak. I simply stared. Then I whispered, "Funny. You call it love when it's obedience. But when I say no, I'm unstable?" Dad's eyes narrowed. "Rowan, you brought me here to take what's mine," I cut in, "on my birthday." "This isn't about you," Sierra said gently. I looked at her, then around the table. The silence wasn't awkward. It was complicit. "Where's the cake?" I asked. "Where's Grandpa's cocktail? He liked Manhattans." No one answered. Uncle Dave muttered, "We're trying to do this the easy way." "Rena," someone began. "It's Rowan," I snapped, "and I'll be right back." I stood up, slow and deliberate. Eyes followed me, but no one moved. I walked out the front door into the sun, which had dropped lower, painting the hood of my car gold. I opened the glove box and pulled out a file. Thick. Labeled. Sealed. Everything I needed. Then I slid my phone from my purse, tapped the red circle, and pressed record. When I returned, I placed the phone, face down, next to the envelope. They didn't notice, but they would. "If you think today was about inheritance," I said quietly, "you're not ready for what's coming next." The only thing they didn't count on was me having proof. The moment the door shut behind me, I didn't look back. Not at Sierra's smirk, not at the glassy-eyed silence of my mother, not even at the envelope my father had tried to pass off as benevolence. I walked straight to the car, opened the driver's side, and slid inside without a breath of hesitation. For a second, I just sat there. The sun had dropped behind the neighbor's oak, casting long shadows through the windshield, striping the dashboard in gold and black. Then I reached across to the glove box and pulled it open. The folder was right where I left it, thick, labeled Estate W. Marin, taped shut like it held more than paper. And in a way, it did. It held intention. It held memory. It held war. I placed it on my lap and turned the engine, letting the quiet hum settle over me as I drove home. My apartment greeted me with its usual chill. I didn't turn on the lights, just let the street lamps filter in through the blinds. The folder went onto the table like a final move on a chessboard. I locked the door, dropped my bag, and opened the small wall safe hidden behind a row of old poetry books. Inside, a USB drive, marked only with a red dot. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered once, then played the video. Grandpa, pale but lucid, sat upright in his green cardigan. He looked straight into the camera and said, "If anyone watches this after I'm gone, know this. I left it to Rowan." Not because she asked, because she stayed. His voice was raspy but certain. "She showed up. She fed me. She remembered how I take my coffee. No one else did." I paused the video. My throat tightened. Not from grief, but from the validation. Then I opened Zoom and called Andrea. She answered from what looked like a swanky rooftop, cocktail in hand. Her earrings glinted against the early evening sky. She took one look at my face and sighed, setting the drink down off screen. "Tell me you didn't sign anything." I shook my head. "They ambushed me. On my birthday." "Of course they did." She was already clicking, adjusting screens. "Okay, let's go over everything again. Timeline, documents, witnesses." We spent an hour reviewing everything. Grandpa's will, notarized and time-stamped. His video, the hospice schedule with my name signed in and out. The evaluation I'd undergone 4 months ago by a third-party psychiatrist who had no idea who my family even was. It read clearly, no sign of cognitive instability. Mental state, resilient, emotionally withheld but sound. While Andrea cross-checked timestamps, I stood up and crossed to my printer in the corner. One by one, I printed every document again. Hard copies. I labeled folders with a thick black marker. Conservatorship threat. Psych eval. Will video. Anonymous tip. Under the harsh overhead light, I felt less like a victim and more like a prosecutor preparing her closing arguments. If they pull the conservatorship trick, Andrea said, flipping through the files I'd sent her, this evaluation will gut it. Let them try, I muttered. I'm done reacting. It's time they answer to something. We were wrapping up when my email pinged. Subject: Marine Estate. The address: anonymous@legacytrustva.org. I clicked. It was an audio file. Sierra's voice. If she doesn't sign, we'll just make it look like she's having a breakdown. Rowan always folds, especially when it's family. Have you ever realized the people closest to you were ready to weaponize your silence? That they didn't misunderstand you? They planned to erase you? If you've ever been betrayed by those meant to protect you, drop a comment number 7 below. Now let's see how I turned silence into a case file. I pressed pause. My jaw clenched. Andrea blinked at me through the screen. What was that? I replayed the clip, holding the speaker closer. She listened, eyebrows rising. Then she stood from her seat on the rooftop and walked away from the party noise. Her earrings stopped catching the city lights. She came back into frame, now against a brick wall. I was going to finish that cocktail, she said calmly, but now I'm calling the ethics board at Fairfax County. Then she smiled. Cold. Legal. Deadly. They built a story, I said quietly. I built a file. Let's see which one holds up in court. Andrea nodded once. I'm sending the first shot. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. I watched as she attached the psych report, the will, the video file, and the audio clip. To whom? I asked. To the family's legal counsel and the court clerk handling probate inquiries, she replied. Subject line: intent to undermine mental capacity, evidence of coercion. I exhaled slowly. There was no music in the background, no dramatic flash, just the soft ding of her email sent. Later that night, I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stepped out onto the narrow balcony of my apartment. The city buzzed below, windows flickering across high-rises like fireflies. I sipped cold brew from a tall Starbucks cup, still half full. For a long moment, I just stood there, remembering the scholarship I turned down, the dorm room I never moved into, the days I stayed to brush Grandpa's hair and manage his oxygen. I took another sip. War had begun. On my terms. She called me manipulative, so I showed the world what manipulation really looks like. The building shimmered with artificial light and curated lies. Banners lined the walls, each bearing Sierra's brand name in serif gold, flanked by portraits of her in various staged poses. One hand in her pocket, chin tilted just slightly upward, the embodiment of curated grace. The biggest banner of all was behind the main stage, printed in massive block letters. Built on grace, driven by legacy. I stood near the back of the room, blending in with the crowd of investors, stylists, and socialites sipping on complimentary Prosecco. No one paid attention to me. That was the plan. I hadn't RSP'd. Andrea had gotten me in. Sometimes a well-worded legal notice sent privately to a venue manager could open more doors than an invitation ever could. In the meantime, Andrea positioned herself near the AV Tech booth, inconspicuously dressed in a black blazer and flats. From her phone, she drafted a message containing a secure video link, preloaded, time-stamped, authenticated. At the exact moment the footage aired, she would send it to 3 trusted journalists, including one from Fashion Ethics Watch. From the wings, I watched Sierra smile into the spotlight. Her blouse sparkled under the LED beams, and she gestured with perfectly timed grace. The crowd leaned in, phones raised, filters ready. I just want to thank everyone who believed in the vision, she said, breathy and humble. This brand is about family, about honoring those who came before. She placed a hand over her heart. My grandfather was my biggest inspiration. His wisdom, his presence, everything I do is rooted in that legacy. I could practically hear Andrea's eye roll through text. I slipped a small USB into the AV tech's hand. Scheduled drop, I whispered. Final promo clip. He nodded, barely glancing at me. Exactly 37 seconds later, the lights flickered. The screen behind Sierra dimmed. The logo faded. And then the video began. It wasn't polished. It wasn't edited. It was raw. Grainy footage of Sierra in Grandpa's bedroom, pacing in heels. You need to sign those transfer papers today. I'm launching this brand in 2 weeks, and I'm not dealing with your oxygen machine again. She snapped, voice sharp, teeth clenched. Then came the sentence. Hurry up and die so I can launch this brand. The room stopped breathing. Even the tech who had played it sat frozen, one hand still hovering near the control board. Sierra froze mid-sentence, her mic still live. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Oh my God!" I stepped back into the shadows. For a brief moment, I remembered the last time Grandpa held my hand in the hospital. His skin had been dry and cool. His voice a whisper, "Let them scream, Rowan." The truth doesn't have to. That sentence now rang like armor in my ears. On Twitter, a blue-check fashion KOL posted instantly, "So much for the inspiring granddaughter narrative. Shaq Golden Grifter." Across the room, a blogger shouted, "Unfollowed!" loud enough for it to echo. A camera from CNN Local tilted toward the chaos. One of their field reporters, who had been taking quiet notes in the front row, now held up his iPhone to capture Sierra's reaction. Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "No, that's out of context," she stammered. But the room didn't care. The screen still hung behind her like a cross she couldn't dismount. "You've all seen what she's doing," Sierra barked, her composure crumbling. "This is slander." Security guards stepped forward to quietly escort her off the stage, but she twisted out of their reach and grabbed the mic. Her voice cracked under the weight of desperation. "This was sabotage! She's jealous! She always has been!" But no one listened. Phones were up. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs into judgment. An older man near the center aisle, gray suit, silk tie, stood up slowly and said aloud, clearly for the record, "This is not the legacy I bought into." He turned and walked out without waiting for a reply. I later learned he was Maxwell Keene, the second largest investor in her company. I didn't wait for her to finish. I walked out the same side door I'd entered through. Andrea was already waiting by a rideshare down the block, holding 2 iced coffees like she'd just stepped out of a yoga class. "You're early," she said. "She's imploding. Perfectly on cue." Andrea handed me the drink. "Congrats, your first public kill." I didn't smile, not yet. Inside the venue, someone updated the company's Wikipedia page. Controversy, elder abuse allegation. Under references, video surfaces at public PR event. By the time I got home, the hashtags were trending. Golden Grifter, Legacy lies. Not inspired, just entitled. Brands began to issue quiet statements. "We are re-evaluating our partnership with Sierra Marine." One investor pulled out publicly. Another followed within the hour. Sierra tried to fight back. She posted a shaky Instagram story that night. Red eyes, trembling voice. "This is slander. We're suing." Andrea saw it first. She sent me a screenshot with a single line beneath it. "Good. Let them sue. Discovery works both ways." When they couldn't steal my money, they tried to steal my mind. It started with a white envelope. No return address, no signature. Just a single line typed across the top. Petition for conservatorship, Marine v. Marine. I didn't flinch. I didn't panic. I just handed it to Andrea, who skimmed it once, twice, and then said flatly, "They're actually doing it." I nodded. Of course they are. We were in her office, downtown, corner unit, windows that overlooked the courthouse, where it would all go down. The table between us was lined with folders, each one labeled like ammunition. Mental health eval, primary care records, witness affidavits, coercion recording, and my favorite, Sierra leak strategy. Andrea tapped her finger against the petition. They're claiming emotional instability due to unresolved grief, that your reaction to the inheritance issue proves cognitive fragility. That's cute, I said, especially considering I predicted this 6 months ago. 6 months ago, before Grandpa passed, my campus therapist had asked, "Why do you document everything, even your emotions?" I had looked her in the eye and answered, "Because they'll try to say I made it up." And now, here we were. I leaned forward. Let's bury this. The hearing room smelled like bureaucracy, cheap carpet, recycled air, tension wrapped in silence. The fluorescent lights hummed just loud enough to irritate, but not enough to complain. Linda sat clutching a rosary that matched her scarf. She wasn't Catholic. Gregory wore a navy tie, and the look of a man who believed his surname gave him authority. Sierra didn't look up once. Her phone screen glowed faintly on her lap, even as the clerk called the case to order. Andrea stood first. "Your Honor," she began, her voice like stone wrapped in silk. "Before we entertain the claim of mental incompetence, I ask the court to admit this into evidence. A certified psychological evaluation, conducted by Dr. Nora Whitman, Ph.D., board-licensed, third-party selected, and filed 6 months prior to the events in question." She placed the sealed folder on the table. It hit with a satisfying thump. Judge Caldwell arched an eyebrow. "Proceed." Andrea flipped to the second page. The report states, and I quote, "Subject displays high-functioning emotional regulation with no indicators of delusion, cognitive impairment, or depressive disorder. However, patient does report long-term emotional neglect by primary family unit." Gregory's jaw tensed. Then Dr. Whitman herself stepped forward. Hair silver, blazer crisp, voice calm. "I interviewed Ms. Marin 3 separate times," she said. "I found her lucid, emotionally grounded, and remarkably self-aware. If anything, I noted signs of gaslighting trauma, often found in cases of familial manipulation." The air in the courtroom shifted. I looked over at Sierra. Her face twitched, just once. Not enough for anyone else to see. But I caught it. Gregory, on the other hand, erupted. "This is a setup," he barked. "She found a shrink to play along." The judge held up a hand. "Mr. Marin, you'll contain yourself." He didn't. "She's always been difficult. She isolates, she keeps secrets, she—" "That's enough," Judge Caldwell said, voice sharp. "One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." Andrea didn't even look at him. She looked at the judge and calmly added, "We also have an email trail, Your Honor, initiated by Mr. Marin, attempting to forge documentation of mental decline. The metadata aligns with the date of the first draft of this petition." The judge paused. Then he turned to the clerk. "File that for review under seal." 20 minutes later, the ruling came down like a quiet thunderclap. "The court finds insufficient cause to proceed with conservatorship," Judge Caldwell said. "Furthermore, this court refers the petitioning party to the Office of Civil Review for investigation into possible abuse of the conservatorship process. Gregory said nothing. Linda crossed herself. Wrong direction. Sierra stared into her lap like she was trying to disappear into it. Andrea handed me a beige folder as we walked out. "You ready for the courtroom spotlight?" she asked. "Because next time, we go public." I didn't answer right away. On the sidewalk outside, my phone buzzed with a TikTok DM from Heather Tran, someone I hadn't talked to since high school. The message simply read, "Saw the news. You were always the strong one. Keep fighting." Across the street, a news van from Channel 9 idled near the courthouse. The anchor inside was on standby, voice rehearsing under his breath. The segment would run that night. Fairfax courtroom standoff. Heiress fights back against family petition. Full report at 6. I looked up at the cloudless sky. Let them try to block the sun. I had court-certified daylight now. If they want attention, I'll give them a front-row seat to the truth. The courthouse plaza buzzed like a beehive. Tripods locked, mics poised, interns holding iced coffees for reporters rehearsing their intros. A woman in a trench coat did a live TikTok broadcast with the caption, "Fairfax family war goes public. Is this succession IRL? #, Justice for Rowan, had already begun trending by the time I reached the front steps. They wanted a spectacle? I brought the receipts. Grandpa once told me, when people lie long enough, the truth doesn't have to shout. It just needs to show up. That line rang in my chest like a bell as I walked through the double doors. Head high, heels deliberate against the marble floor, USB drive secured in my blazer pocket, and the original notarized will tucked under my arm like a declaration of independence. The courtroom was packed, press in the first row, family in the second, and the rest filled with curious strangers, activists, and even a retired Marine who once served with Grandpa, his silver pin still on his lapel. Andrea walked beside me, her expression unreadable, her briefcase clicking at her side. Gregory and Sierra were already seated. Gregory in a dark suit that couldn't hide the sweat under his collar, and Sierra with her makeup done like she thought this was another brand launch. It wasn't. It was a reckoning. Andrea stood first, her voice measured and absolute. "Your Honor, we ask to present evidence supporting full legal authority of the estate to Ms. Rowan Marin, per the deceased's notarized wishes, and supporting witness testimony." The judge gestured. "Proceed." Andrea handed the USB to the court tech. A moment later, the screen behind the bench flickered to life. There he was, Grandpa. Seated upright, oxygen tube barely visible, green cardigan buttoned wrong at the top, but his voice? Clear. "I leave it all to my granddaughter Rowan," he said, eyes steady. "Not because she's blood, but because she's loyalty." The room went still. I glanced sideways. Sierra's jaw was tight. Her hands were clenched on her lap, fingers digging into the soft flesh of her palm. She didn't look up, didn't blink. Andrea turned toward the benches. "Your Honor, we also call Nurse Valerie Green, who oversaw Mr. Walter Marine's care during his final 6 months." A middle-aged woman in blue scrubs rose. Her hand was steady as she swore in. "Rowan was there nearly every day," she said. "She helped bathe him, feed him. The others?" She looked straight at Sierra and Gregory. "Not once." Next came the notary, Mr. David Knox, neat tie, precise voice. "I was there the day the will was signed," he stated. "I verified Mr. Marin's ID, mental state, and intentions. The documents are authentic and unaltered." The judge leaned forward. "Any objections?" Gregory cleared his throat. There were concerns over the timing. Andrea didn't let him finish. And yet no alternative will has been submitted. No proof of duress. No challenge within the legal time frame. Only accusations without standing. Gregory looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. The judge turned to him again. Mr. Marin, why did you fail to disclose your posthumous financial management of estate assets? Gregory hesitated. There were minor adjustments. Sierra whispered something sharply, her lips tight. But the judge raised his hand. Mr. Marin, this court is referring your non-compliance to the Probate Oversight Board for separate investigation. Gregory sat down slowly, face pale. The gavel came down like a final sentence. This court recognizes Rowan Marin as the sole legal heir of the Marin estate. All future claims against the estate are null unless supported by a new documented cause. This matter is closed. Applause started slowly. Not theatrical, righteous. I turned my head slightly, enough to see the veteran in the third row rise. He pressed his hand to his chest and gave one silent nod. I didn't smile. I just nodded back. Sierra? She didn't move. Then, like a string cut from a marionette, she collapsed, knees buckling, head hitting Gregory's thigh on the way down. Cameras went off like gunfire. Andrea didn't even glance. She slid a folder into her tote and whispered to me, "It's over." But it wasn't. Not entirely. Outside the courthouse, a young reporter stuck a mic in my face. "Miss Rowan, what's next for you now that you've won?" Before I could answer, a larger camera crew pushed in. Channel 7's anchor spoke directly to the lens. Tonight on the Evening Report, one woman versus an empire. A granddaughter defends her name and wins. I waited for the noise to die down, then said, "Something useful, for the invisible ones. Have you ever been pushed out until the day they realized you were the only one who could fix what they broke? That quiet shift from disposable to undeniable. If you've ever stood up not for revenge, but for something better, drop a comment number 9 below. Let's see what happens when truth becomes the legacy." That night, Twitter lit up with the headline, "Fairfax heiress clears her name. Justice for Rowan." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt seen. They tried to bury me, but I was the seed, not the secret. The lights inside City Hall were soft, deliberate, not grand, not theatrical, just warm. Outside, dusk curled against the stone pillars. I stood behind the curtain, fingertips brushing the edge of the bird-shaped brooch at my collar. It was old brass now, a little worn, but intact. Grandpa gave it to me when I turned 21. He said, "For who you are when no one's watching." Now they were watching. A small child tugged at her mother's sleeve nearby, pointing toward the program flyer with our logo. "Look, Mommy, it's the flying bird lady." Her mother smiled. "She's the reason we came." And just like that, the air felt lighter. The announcer's voice carried gently into the hall. This year's honoree for outstanding civic impact has not only changed policy, but changed lives. Please welcome Rowan Marin. I stepped into the light, alone. And for the first time, that word felt like a crown, not a sentence. People rose, neighbors, nurses, city officials, caregivers who had written me letters. A law student held up a copy of Civil Defense Against Conservatorship Abuse and smiled like I'd written it myself. On the edge of the crowd, someone passed out POA templates with my logo embossed on the front. A bird flying from an open cage. Below it, the words, "Legacy is loyalty." I approached the podium and breathed in slowly. "This isn't for applause," I said. "This is for remembrance." The room hushed. I'm not here as someone's daughter. I'm not here as the girl who got erased and had to scream to be seen. I'm here as myself, and that is enough. I let the silence stretch, not empty, full. As I stepped away from the podium, an older man approached from the side of the stage. He extended his hand. "Your grandfather once beat me in court," he said, voice rough but respectful. "He'd admire you even more." Later that day, we opened the first workshop, The Invisible Heirs. No stage, no spotlights, just folding chairs, coffee, handouts. Every chair was filled. A former home nurse shared her story. A young caregiver brought her brother's guardianship documents for review. A high school senior came with her grandmother's living will, unsure if it was even legal. We helped them all. One student raised her hand. "I printed the article about you for my civics class," she said shyly. "Our teacher said we need more real stories like this." Midway through the day, an older woman stood up, maybe 70. Her voice trembled. "My son added me to his estate plan last week," he said, "because of that woman on the news." "That woman was you!" She wiped her eyes. "I thought I'd die invisible, but I won't." That night, I came home. Not to the apartment, to Grandpa's house, now mine. I walked past the garden beds, through the kitchen, and out to the porch swing. The boards creaked like they always had. I pulled the old notebook from its hiding place, behind the garden ledger, under the porch beams. Inside was a letter, folded once. His handwriting was a little uneven, but still his. "If you're reading this, I am probably gone. But you need to know. I always knew it would be you. You were never invisible to me." I didn't cry. I just sat there and listened. To the quiet, to the birds, to the sound of breath returning to my life like it belonged again. Then I struck a match and lit a small candle on the porch rail, shielding the flame from the breeze. Somewhere beyond the pines, a bird called out, sharp and clear. It sounded like goodbye, or maybe like recognition. A week later, Channel 9 aired a segment titled, "She Faced Her Family." Then she faced the system. The last shot was a high drone sweeping over the community center, showing the crowd exiting the first Invisible Heirs event. Then it cut to me, sitting on the porch, speaking directly to the camera. "Next year," I said, "we expand to every state. No heir left behind." I no longer have to fight to be heard. Now, I sit on the porch of a home that's mine, watching the world turn without needing to chase it. The peace I've found doesn't come from victory on paper, but from no longer needing permission to exist. I've learned that truth doesn't need to shout, it only needs to stand. That justice, though slow, still wins if you dare to stand against those who weaponize smiles and signatures. And that those seen as disposable, invisible, were carrying the real legacy all along: resilience, kindness, and refusal to disappear. And what about you? Have you ever been made to feel invisible? Share your story below, because maybe your truth is someone else's flashlight. Comment below and tell us, when you finally stood up, what changed?